It's my honor to be involved in the preparations for the Rio meetings 20 years ago, and we were facing some very big problems of scale and impact that we had never addressed before as a global community. So it was an honor to work on the preparations for Rio and to put together the instruments, if you will, that were eventually endorsed by the heads of state, and we've come a long way since then, and it's a proud moment 20 years ago. Maybe we haven't gotten everything done that we needed to, but we're still here, we're still at it, and I'm proud to be at COP18 to put my shoulder to the wheel and make a contribution.
How would you analyse the change that we've seen in those 2 decades? Because in a sense, we may have come a long way, but also when you think that that treaty was signed by a Republican president, it was signed by a fairly right-wing British Prime Minister who was in no doubt about the dangers of global warming. And that sort of paradigm has shifted quite substantially now. So how would you assess those 2 decades from a political perspective?
Well, let me first reflect on the technical. We've learned a lot the last 2 decades. Think of the improved understanding in the science, the work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And we have a much greater understanding of the physics and chemistry of climate change. We understand the impacts and the opportunities to mitigate. We now have a big portfolio of technologies and policies. And the whole topic of climate change adaptation wasn't very well known 2 decades ago. But today, of course, we're learning to adapt to a changing climate. So a lot has changed. We have a lot more knowledge, and I think we're more savvy as decision makers and deciding the fate of our planet. The politics, wow, they're rough and tumble, aren't they? And they're up and down, and we're here. And world leaders and sending their ministers to this meeting to help make decisions and a roadmap for the future. There's be some big decisions taken in the next few years with regard to mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and addressing this global problem. So I'm optimistic.
And it's hard, I guess. There are many NGOs in this room, and there are many youth groups involved. There's tremendous frustration, isn't there, at the apparent lack of progress, the slowness, the snail-like pace in which these negotiations progress. What, from your experience, what can you offer in terms of reassurance?
Well, when I started this work, I was a young man. Yeah. So I think one lesson learned is stay with it and stay the course. Now, climate change is, when you talk about climate change, it's something that occurs over decades to centuries. And so indeed, we do become impatient. We're looking for quick fixes and opportunities to address the problem with some very simple solutions. It's a complex problem. The science is complex, the politics are complex, the economics are complex. So every country here comes at the issue from a different perspective. So it's a difficult puzzle to put together, but I encourage the youth to take the long view. Give us some time to get this work done. We've got one Earth, we need to get it right. I think we learned a lesson 15 years ago at Kyoto. We rushed to put together an agreement. We thought it was a good agreement, it was the best agreement we could get at the time, but looking back, well, maybe we should have done some things differently. So a lesson, takeaway that I have is stay the course, be patient, understand the needs of all the parties to the convention, and we'll figure out a solution.
And I guess the lessons from Kyoto will be taken on board when we work towards this deal, proposed deal in 2015. What, given what you said about perhaps some mistakes were made, what do you think we could see that's slightly different in the 2015 talks and proposed deal?
You know, climate change is a global problem, and everybody needs to participate. It's a global problem, and the solution will only be with all countries working together. When we look back on the Kyoto Protocol, well, 55% of the emissions were off the table, so to speak, and I think we learned that didn't work. And so as we look forward to implementing the goals of the Durban Platform and moving towards a legally binding agreement in 2015, I'm encouraged that everyone's here negotiating earnestly, sincerely, and doing it in a transparent way. We know a lot more about the greenhouse gas emission profiles of the participating countries. We know the work we have to do. So now the challenge is to put together the political deal so that we can all get behind it and support it and implement. And that will be the challenge in the next 2 or 3 years to to put together the architecture of that deal.
And the Global Environment Facility are one of the sort of key parties here in terms of finance and funding. Give us an idea about what your role here is at these negotiations.
Well, indeed, the Global Environment Facility was born on the margins of the Rio conventions, and we are what we affectionately known as the financial mechanism of the convention. What's that mean? Well, we're the money. We are the trust fund, the entity entrusted with the resources to help countries, developing countries, transition countries, meet their obligations under the convention. And it's a big job to be good stewards of these resources and to make sure that we meet the needs of our clients and customers. The GEF gets involved in developing all kinds of interesting products, national communications, greenhouse gas inventories, and we also invest in mitigation activities, adaptation activities. So it's a robust portfolio, it's an exciting time, and we're doing the best we can to implement our goals and to support not only the climate convention, but of course the GEF also supports the biodiversity convention and the Stockholm Convention that deals with toxic chemicals. So an interesting dimension of the GEF is that the GEF is where all these conventions come together, and our opportunities to work synergistically to address global environmental problems. That's what we do at the GEF, bringing together our resources, our technical resources, financial resources, working with our partners to fulfill the goals of the conventions that were born in Rio.
And I know governments do make long-term financial pledges, so I guess it's not immediately apparent when funds are drying up, but have you noticed, is it been clear that governments are tightening their belts when it comes to overseas development funding, and particularly the money that you guys deal with?
Well, there's no ignoring the global financial crisis. But that said, at the GEF, we've been very proud to work with our donors. They've come through with their the commitments, and the pledges are being fulfilled. We're looking forward to working with donors to fulfill the obligations under the convention. And again, I'm encouraged. Yes, it's a little cloudy out there. There's some gray clouds on the horizon. But that said, take the long view, and that's my message for everyone, is that we don't need to solve this problem in a matter of days or weeks or months. Let's take time, let's get it right. And that includes the climate financial architecture, if you will, and working together with the recipients and the donors to put together a package which everybody's comfortable with and can fulfill the obligations under the conventions.
And absolutely take time and let's get it right. Is it an issue when you come to an event like this, a conference like this, and in a sense it feels a bit like a cup final, and we need to see a result at the end, and if that result isn't what some people want, or if there isn't a good score, then people walk away feeling disappointed and say, well, that was a waste of time.
Well, each COP is rather dramatic in its own way. I've learned that over the year. I've done 18 of these, and here we are in the first week of COP18. Ministers will be arriving over the weekend, and I guess it'll become even more interesting and intense in the negotiating rooms across the convention center. But again, I'm optimistic that we'll get a deal. I see commitment in the eyes of the negotiators, and I'm looking forward to working with them to help construct this deal, and again, to get out to fulfill the goals of the Durban platform. We've put together the architecture of a good deal. Now we just need to work out the details and bring everybody together.
On a final point, when you're in the negotiation chamber and when you're taking part in the talks, do you see the divides as simply as the developed world on one side and the developing on the other? Is it that clear when you're in the negotiating chamber, or are there slightly more interesting dynamics at work?
Well, indeed, there are a lot of interesting dynamics at work. If you look at the parties here, they all have different national circumstances, they have different needs, they're working on different timescales, and so there's no one size fits all. It's very interesting that we have different negotiating groups here, but in fact, as this deal unfolds, I think each country understands the need to compromise, to reach out to others, and to find the common ground. And so that's what makes this process so interesting to me, is putting together the building blocks of that deal.